What if I told you that being called too risky to invest in by your own parents was actually the best thing that ever happened to you? That while my brother got a full college fund, I got something even more valuable. By graduation day, I had built something that made their $20,000 investment look like pocket change. But here's the twist they never saw coming. I'm standing in my dorm room mirror adjusting my graduation cap for the 10th time. My hands are shaking, not from nerves about walking across that stage tomorrow. No, I'm shaking because in less than 24 hours, my entire family is about to learn something that will change everything. You see, for the past 4 years, they've had no idea what I've actually been doing. To them, I'm just Sophie, the daughter who had to take out loans while my brother Ethan got a full ride courtesy of mom and dad's college fund. Let me take you back to where this all started. I was 17, sitting at our kitchen table with college acceptance letters spread out in front of me. Stanford, Northwestern USC, dreams on paper. My parents walked in and I thought this was it. This was my moment. Dad cleared his throat. "Sophie, honey, we need to talk about college expenses." My heart started racing. I pointed to the letters. "I got into Stanford, Dad. Can you believe it?" Mom sat down slowly. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. But we need to be realistic about finances." Then came the words that would haunt me for years. "We've been saving for Ethan's education since he was born. MIT doesn't come cheap, and he's our sure bet. You're more of a risk taker, Sophie. We can't afford to fund both of you." I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break, just crack, like ice forming on a window. "What does that mean exactly?" I asked, though I already knew. "It means loan scholarships, work study. You're smart. You'll figure it out." Dad's voice was matter of fact, like he was discussing the weather. Ethan walked in just then, fresh from lacrosse practice. "What's going on?" "We're just explaining to Sophie how college funding works," Mom said, immediately brightening. "Are you excited about MIT, honey?" I watched my brother's face light up. He had no idea what had just happened. He didn't know that in that moment, our parents had just told me I was worth less than he was, that his future mattered more than mine. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The crack in my chest had spread. I could feel it branching out like lightning, reaching every corner of my heart. But here's the thing about being 17 and having your world shatter. You either crumble or you decide to build something new from the pieces. I chose to build. The next morning, I walked downstairs to find Mom making Ethan's favorite breakfast, pancakes with fresh berries. She glanced at me over her shoulder. "There's cereal in the pantry, Sophie." I poured myself a bowl of generic cornflakes and sat at our kitchen island. Ethan was scrolling through MIT's website on his laptop, pointing out dorm rooms to Mom. "Look at this one, Mom. It has a view of the Charles River." "Oh, that's beautiful, sweetheart. You deserve the best." I took a bite of cereal that tasted like cardboard. That's when I made my first real decision as an adult. I wasn't going to spend the next 4 years bitter. I wasn't going to waste energy hating them. I was going to prove that their risky daughter was the best investment they never made. But first, I had to survive the next 24 hours without completely falling apart. I lasted exactly 3 days before I broke down completely. It happened in the shower of all places. I was washing my hair when suddenly I couldn't breathe. 4 years of college, 4 years of proving myself, 4 years of watching my parents beam with pride at Ethan while I figured out how to survive on ramen noodles and determination. I slid down the shower wall and sobbed until the water ran cold. But sometimes the universe sends you exactly what you need when you need it most. The next weekend, we had our annual family barbecue. Extended family, neighbors, the whole circus. I was hiding in the corner picking at potato salad when Uncle Javier found me. Uncle Javier was Dad's younger brother, and honestly, the black sheep of the family. He'd dropped out of college at 19 to start his own landscaping business. Every family gathering, someone made a joke about Javi and his dirt. He sat down next to me on the porch steps. You look like someone stole your lunch money. I tried to smile. Just tired, I guess. Bull. He took a swig of his beer. I heard about the college thing. My stomach dropped. What about it? Your parents think they're being practical. They see Ethan as a safe investment and you as a gamble. He turned to look at me. You want to know what I see? I nodded, not trusting my voice. I see a kid who's been fighting her whole life. Fighting for attention. Fighting for recognition. Fighting to be seen. That's not a weakness, Sophie. That's a superpower. Something in my chest loosened. Just a little. When I was your age, he continued, everyone told me I was making a mistake. No college degree meant no future. You know what I learned? The people who doubt you the most are usually the ones too scared to take risks themselves. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card. This is my accountant. She specializes in education financing. I want you to call her. Uncle Javier, I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm offering. And before you say no, let me tell you something. 10 years ago, I almost went bankrupt. You know who believed in me when everyone else wrote me off, your grandmother. She gave me $20,000 and told me to prove them all wrong. I stared at the card in my hand. She passed away last year, but she left me something in her will. $20,000 with a note that said, for the grandchild brave enough to bet on themselves. He smiled. That's you, kiddo. I started crying right there on the porch steps, not the desperate broken sobs from the shower. These were tears of relief, of hope, of feeling seen for the first time in months. But here's the deal, Uncle Javier said, his voice getting serious. This isn't charity. This is an investment. I believe you're going to build something incredible, and someday, when you're successful, you're going to pay it forward to another kid who needs someone to believe in them. I threw my arms around him. I won't let you down. I know you won't. But more importantly, don't let yourself down. That night, I called his accountant. Her name was Maria Santos, and she had this warm, no-nonsense voice that made me feel instantly calm. Your uncle told me about your situation, she said after I'd explained everything. First thing we need to do is get you a complete picture of what you're working with. Financial aid scholarships, work-study programs. There are options your parents probably don't even know about. Over the next 2 weeks, Maria walked me through everything. We filled out FAFSA forms, researched merit scholarships, and identified work-study opportunities. She taught me about student loans, interest rates, and repayment plans. Knowledge is power, Sophie, she told me during one of our calls. The more you understand about financing your education, the better decisions you'll make. But the real breakthrough came when Uncle Javier sat me down for what he called a reality check. College is just the beginning, he said. What matters is what you do with the opportunities you create for yourself. I want you to start thinking like an entrepreneur from day one. What do you mean? I mean every skill you learn, every connection you make, every challenge you overcome, it's all building towards something bigger. Don't just survive college. Use it as a launching pad. He pulled out a notebook and slid it across the table. I want you to keep a journal, not about your feelings, but about ideas. Business ideas, project ideas, ways to solve problems you see around you. By the time you graduate, I want that notebook full. I opened it to the first page. He'd written something in his messy handwriting. Success isn't about having money handed to you. It's about what you do when nobody believes in you except yourself. That night, I made my second adult decision. I wasn't just going to prove my parents wrong. I was going to build something so extraordinary that their $20,000 safe bet on Ethan would look like pocket change compared to what I accomplished on my own. The application deadlines were approaching fast. I had 3 weeks to finalize my financial aid packages and make my choice. But for the first time since that kitchen table conversation, I felt like I had a real shot. I wasn't their risky daughter anymore. I was an entrepreneur in training, and my education was going to be my first successful venture. Move-in day arrived like a slap in the face. I'm loading my beat-up Honda Civic with everything I owned while across the driveway Mom and Dad are packing Ethan's brand new Jeep Cherokee. A graduation gift, they called it. Meanwhile, I'm calculating if I can fit my mini fridge and my desk lamp in the same trip. "You sure you don't need help?" Sophie, Dad called over, but he was already lifting Ethan's new MacBook Pro into the back seat. "I'm good," I called back, wrestling my second-hand desk chair into the trunk. The drive to Northwestern was 4 hours of silence. Just me, my thoughts, and a playlist Uncle Javier had made for me titled Songs for Badasses. Every song was about overcoming odds, proving doubters wrong, building something from nothing. When I pulled up to my dorm, I saw families everywhere. Minivans and SUVs packed with designer bedding, mini fridges, and enough stuff to furnish an apartment. Parents taking pictures, siblings goofing around, everyone looking like they belonged in a college catalog. I grabbed my 2 suitcases and my desk lamp and headed inside. My roommate was already there, Hannah from Connecticut. Her parents were arranging flowers in a crystal vase while her mom hung up what looked like professional photographs of Hannah through the years. "Oh, you must be Sophie," Hannah's mom rushed over. "We've heard so much about you. Are your parents here helping you move in?" "They're helping my brother move into MIT today," I said, setting down my suitcases. "Oh, how wonderful, 2 children in college at the same time. Your parents must be so proud." I forced a smile. "Yeah, they're over the moon." That first night, while Hannah video called her family and showed them how perfectly her side of the room was arranged, I sat on my bare mattress with my notebook and wrote my first entry, Day 1, nobody knows I'm here on my own. That's exactly how I want it. The next morning, I had my first reality check. The campus bookstore. $800 for textbooks. $800 I didn't have. I stood in the middle of the store holding my course list, doing math in my head. If I bought used books online, ate ramen for 2 weeks, and picked up extra shifts at my work-study job, I could maybe afford half of them. That's when I had my first real entrepreneurial breakthrough. I noticed a bulletin board covered in textbooks for sale flyers from previous students. Some of these books were for the exact same courses, just older editions. I spent the next 3 hours calling numbers, negotiating prices, and arranging pickups. By the end of the day, I'd bought all my textbooks for $200. But more than that, I'd connected with a dozen upperclassmen who needed help with various things. Moving furniture, editing papers, tutoring in subjects they were struggling with. I saw an opportunity. Within a week, I'd created what I called Sophie's Solutions. It wasn't a real business yet, just a network of students who needed help and students who could provide it. I took a small percentage for connecting them. $5 here, $10 there. By the end of my first month, I'd made $300. But I wasn't the only one figuring out college life. Every Sunday, I'd call home and hear updates about Ethan's MIT experience. "He's joined 3 clubs already," Mom would gush. "The robotics team, the Entrepreneurship Society, and intramural lacrosse." "That's great," I'd say, not mentioning that I was working 20 hours a week at the campus coffee shop just to afford groceries. And his professors are already taking notice. His engineering professor asked him to be a teaching assistant next semester. Wow. I'd look around my tiny dorm room where I'd been up until 2 a.m. the night before building a basic website for Sophie's Solutions on my 5-year-old laptop. "How are your classes going, honey?" "Good. Really good." I'd leave out the part about how I was acing everything because I couldn't afford to fail. Every B+ was a waste of money I didn't have. The contrast became stark during our first Thanksgiving break. Ethan came home with stories about research opportunities, internship offers, and networking events. I came home with calluses on my hands from working the coffee shop espresso machine and a growing notebook full of business ideas. But something interesting happened during that Thanksgiving dinner. While Ethan was telling everyone about his professor's latest research project, I found myself really listening. Not with jealousy, but with curiosity. He was passionate about what he was learning, genuinely excited about engineering. And for the first time, I realized something important. This wasn't a competition between us. He was thriving in his environment, and I was thriving in mine. We were just taking completely different paths. After dinner, Ethan cornered me in the kitchen. "Hey, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Are you okay? You seem different. More focused or something." I looked at my brother. Really looked at him and saw something I'd missed before. He wasn't just the golden child coasting on parental support. He was working hard too. His success wasn't automatic. "I'm figuring things out," I said. "Mom and Dad don't really talk about what you're doing at school. Just that you're working a lot." "I am working a lot, but I'm also building something." "Building what?" For the first time, I told someone in my family about Sophie's Solutions, about the network I'd created, the small business I was growing, the ideas I was developing. Ethan listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "That's actually really cool, Sophie. Like, really cool." "You think so?" "Yeah. I mean, I'm just studying what professors teach me. You're creating something that didn't exist before." Something shifted between us in that kitchen. Not dramatically, but enough that I felt it. We were still on different paths, but maybe those paths didn't have to be parallel lines that never intersected. When I went back to Northwestern after Thanksgiving, I had a new energy. Sophie's Solutions was growing. I'd connected over 50 students with services they needed, and my small percentage was adding up to real money. More importantly, I was learning things no business class could teach me. How to negotiate, how to solve problems quickly, how to build trust with people I'd never met in person, how to manage money when every dollar mattered. By the end of my first semester, I'd not only covered all my expenses, but saved enough to upgrade my laptop and buy a real desk chair. Not because I had to, but because I could. I wrote in my notebook that night, "First semester complete. Sophie's Solutions has connected 73 students and generated $1,847 in revenue. But the real victory isn't the money. It's that I'm not just surviving college. I'm discovering who I am when nobody's watching." I had no idea that discovery was about to change everything. By sophomore year, Sophie's Solutions had evolved into something I never expected. What started as a simple student connection service had grown into a legitimate digital marketing consultancy. I was helping local businesses in Evanston build their online presence, managing social media accounts, and creating websites for startups that couldn't afford big agencies. The money was getting serious, too. I was pulling in $2,000 a month, sometimes more. Enough to move out of the dorms and into a small apartment off campus. Enough to stop counting every dollar I spent on groceries. But the best part, I was learning at a rate that made my business classes feel like kindergarten. Every client taught me something new. The bakery downtown taught me about seasonal marketing. The yoga studio showed me how to build community through content. The tech startup gave me a crash course in scaling operations. I was becoming the entrepreneur Uncle Javier always said I could be. Meanwhile, Ethan was struggling. It started with phone calls home that sounded different. Less excitement, more stress. "MIT is just really competitive," he'd tell Mom during our family calls. "Everyone here is brilliant. It's hard to stand out." I'd listen from my apartment organizing client files while balancing my laptop on my knees, and I'd feel something unexpected. Sympathy. The truth was, Ethan had never had to fight for anything. Good grades came naturally, sports came easily, and parental approval was a given. But MIT was full of kids just like him, and for the first time in his life, he was average. The real wake-up call came during spring break of my sophomore year. I was home for exactly 3 days before flying to Austin for a client meeting. Yes, a client meeting. A tech company had hired me to redesign their entire digital strategy, and they were paying me enough to cover my entire junior year tuition. I was in my childhood bedroom preparing my presentation when Ethan knocked on my door. "Hey, can we talk?" He looked exhausted, thinner than I remembered with dark circles under his eyes. "Of course. What's up?" He sat on my old desk chair and put his head in his hands. "I think I'm failing." "Failing what?" "Everything." my thesis project, my advanced calculus class, maybe even college entirely. I closed my laptop and gave him my full attention. Talk to me. I don't know how to struggle, Sophie. That sounds stupid, but it's true. Everything's always been easy for me, and now nothing is, and I don't know how to handle it. He looked up at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in my brother's eyes. Fear. My thesis advisor basically told me to start over. 6 months of work, and it's not good enough. I'm so far behind, and everyone else seems to have it figured out. I sat down on my bed across from him. What's your thesis about? Machine learning applications in sustainable energy. But I can't make the connection between the theory and practical implementation. It's like I understand the pieces but can't put them together. Something clicked in my brain. You know what I might be able to help you. How? One of my clients is a renewable energy startup. They're using machine learning to optimize solar panel efficiency. I've been working on their market analysis, but I've picked up a lot about their technical challenges. Ethan's eyes widened. Are you serious? Dead serious. But more than that, I think I can introduce you to their CTO. He might be willing to give you insights that your professors can't. For the next 2 hours, we sat on my bedroom floor, surrounded by printed articles, my client notes, and Ethan's research. I watched my brother's face transform as we connected dots he hadn't been able to see before. Sophie, this is incredible. You're seeing applications that I was completely missing. That's because I'm seeing it from the business side, not just the academic side. You understand the technology better than I ever could, but I understand how it actually gets used in the real world. By the end of our session, Ethan had a completely new direction for his thesis. More importantly, he had something he'd never had before, a study partner who could challenge him from a different angle. But the conversation that changed everything happened the next morning. I was making coffee in the kitchen when Ethan came downstairs, looking more rested than he had in months. I called my advisor last night, he said. Told him about the new direction. He's excited about it. That's amazing. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. I poured him a cup of coffee. Shoot. How did you get so good at this? At business, at connecting ideas, at seeing opportunities? I thought about it for a moment. I think it's because I had to. When nobody's funding your dreams, you get creative about making them happen. That's what I thought. He was quiet for a long moment. Sophie, I owe you an apology. For what? For not seeing what you were building. For not understanding that while I was getting handed opportunities, you were creating your own. Something loosened in my chest. A knot I'd been carrying for 2 years without even realizing it. You don't need to apologize for being supported, Ethan. Maybe not. But I need to apologize for not supporting you. We spent the rest of spring break working together. I helped him refine his thesis approach, and he helped me understand some of the technical aspects of my renewable energy clients' challenges. It was the first time we'd ever collaborated on anything, and it was remarkable how well our different perspectives complemented each other. When I got back to Northwestern, I had a new energy, not just from the successful client meeting in Austin, but from the realization that I wasn't just building a business. I was building a completely different relationship with my family. But I also had a new challenge. My business was growing faster than I could handle alone. I was turning down clients because I didn't have the bandwidth, and I was starting to burn out from trying to manage everything myself. That's when I made the decision that would change my entire trajectory. I was going to scale Sophie's Solutions into a real company. Not just a side hustle, but a legitimate business that could outlast my college years. I spent the next month researching everything I could about business incorporation, hiring employees, and scaling operations. I reached out to Uncle Javier for advice, and he connected me with a small business attorney who specialized in helping young entrepreneurs. By the end of my sophomore year, I had filed paperwork to incorporate Sophie's Solutions as an LLC. I'd hired two other Northwestern students as part-time employees, and I'd landed my biggest client yet, a Chicago-based marketing agency that wanted to outsource their social media management. The contract was worth $30,000 over 6 months. I remember the exact moment I signed that contract. I was sitting in my apartment surrounded by textbooks and client files, and I realized something profound. I wasn't just paying for my own education anymore. I was building something that could pay for other people's education too. In my notebook that night, I wrote, "Sophomore year complete. Sophie Solutions LLC officially launched. Revenue projection for junior year $75,000. But the real milestone isn't financial. It's the moment I stopped seeing myself as the daughter who didn't get college funding and started seeing myself as the entrepreneur who didn't need it. I had no idea that in just a few months, my little company would catch the attention of someone who would change my life forever. Junior year started with an email that made me think someone was playing a practical joke on me. Dear Ms. Carter, we've been following your work with Sophie Solutions through one of our portfolio companies. We'd like to invite you to apply for the National Student Entrepreneur Competition. The winner receives $50,000 in funding and a consulting position with our firm. Best regards, Jennifer Walsh, partner at Meridian Ventures." I read it 3 times before it sank in. Meridian Ventures was one of the most prestigious venture capital firms in Chicago. They managed hundreds of millions of dollars and had backed companies I'd only dreamed of working with. I immediately called Uncle Javier. "They want me to compete for $50,000. Uncle Jay, $50,000. "That's incredible, kiddo, but let me ask you something. Do you think you deserve to be there?" "I don't know. Maybe I mean my company's doing well, but this is national level competition." "Sophie, you've built a profitable business from nothing while maintaining a 3.8 GPA and working 20 hours a week. If you don't belong there, nobody does." The application process was intense. Financial statements, business plans, growth projections, letters of recommendation. I spent 2 weeks crafting the perfect submission, staying up until 3 a.m., fine-tuning every detail. But the real breakthrough came when I had to write the essay portion, describe a challenge you've overcome and how it shaped your entrepreneurial vision. I stared at that blank page for hours. How do you explain to successful business leaders that your biggest challenge was your own family not believing in you? How do you turn that into a strength instead of a sob story? Then I remembered something Uncle Javier had told me. Your story isn't about what happened to you. It's about what you did next. I wrote about resourcefulness, about how funding my own education had taught me to see opportunities where others saw obstacles. About how building a business while managing a full course load had given me skills in efficiency and prioritization that you can't learn in any classroom. I wrote about the difference between having money and creating value, about how my limitations had become my competitive advantages. 3 weeks later, I got the call. "Congratulations, Sophie. You've been selected as one of 20 finalists for the National Student Entrepreneur Competition. The final round will be held in Chicago next month." I hung up the phone and screamed. Actually screamed. My neighbor banged on the wall to tell me to keep it down. But here's the thing about success. The moment you achieve something you've been working toward, you realize how much more work lies ahead. The competition wasn't just about presenting your business. It was about defending every decision you'd made, explaining every financial projection, and proving that you could scale your idea into something that could change an entire industry. I spent the next month preparing like my life depended on it. I rehearsed my pitch in front of mirrors, in front of my employees, in front of anyone who would listen. I memorized every number in my financial statements and researched every judge on the panel. But the most important preparation happened during a call with Ethan. "I heard about the competition," he said. "Mom told me. She's actually really excited." "She is, yeah. I think it's the first time she's really understood what you've been building." "What do you mean?" I showed her your website and explained what Sophie Solutions does. She kept asking questions about how you came up with the idea, how you found your first clients, how you manage everything while still getting good grades. Something warm spread through my chest. What did you tell her? I told her you're the smartest person I know, and that I've been learning more from you in the past year than from any of my professors. Ethan, that's not true. It is true. Sophie, do you know what my thesis advisor said after I incorporated your market analysis into my research? What? He said it was the most innovative approach he'd seen from a student in 5 years. He asked me where I learned to think like that, and I told him I learned it from my sister. I had to put the phone down for a moment. 3 years of feeling invisible, and suddenly I was being seen by the person whose approval I'd wanted most. There's something else, Ethan continued. I've been thinking about what I want to do after graduation. All my classmates are applying for jobs at big engineering firms, but I keep thinking about what you said about creating value instead of just following a path someone else built. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about starting something. Maybe something that combines my technical skills with your business approach, like a partnership. Are you serious? Dead serious, but first you need to win this competition. The day of the competition arrived like a storm. 20 students each with 15 minutes to present their business and defend it against questions from a panel of 5 judges. The room was filled with venture capitalists, successful entrepreneurs, and business leaders who had built the kind of companies I'd only read about. I was scheduled to present 18th out of 20. For 6 hours, I watched brilliant students pitch everything from biotech startups to AI platforms to sustainable fashion brands. The level of innovation was staggering. When my name was called, I walked to the front of the room carrying a simple folder and my laptop. No fancy props, no elaborate slide deck, just me and the story of Sophie's solutions. Good afternoon. My name is Sophie Carter, and 3 years ago, my parents told me I was too risky an investment for them to fund my college education. I saw a few judges exchange glances. This wasn't the typical opening they were expecting. Today, I'm here to tell you why that was the best thing that ever happened to me. For the next 15 minutes, I told them about resourcefulness, about building a network when you don't have connections, about creating opportunities when none exist, about turning limitations into competitive advantages. I showed them how Sophie's Solutions had grown from a bulletin board service to a company that had helped over 300 businesses improve their digital presence. I explained our revenue model, our growth trajectory, and our expansion plans. But more than that, I told them about the philosophy behind everything I'd built. That the best businesses don't just solve problems. They solve problems for people who might otherwise be overlooked. When I finished, the room was completely silent. Then judge number 3, a woman who had built and sold 2 companies for over $100 million, leaned forward. Sophie, that was remarkable. But I have to ask you something. You've clearly proven that you can succeed without traditional funding. Why do you need our money now? It was the question I'd been hoping for. Because I've proven I can build something from nothing. Now I want to see what I can build with the right resources and mentorship. This isn't about needing your money. It's about showing you what I can do with it. 3 days later, I got the call that changed everything. Sophie, this is Jennifer Walsh from Meridian Ventures. I'm calling to inform you that you've won the National Student Entrepreneur Competition. I sat down on my apartment floor and cried. Not sad tears, not overwhelmed tears, but tears of pure vindication. The girl who was too risky to invest in had just won $50,000 and a job offer from one of the most prestigious firms in the country. But the best part wasn't the money or the recognition. It was the call I made immediately afterward. Uncle Javier, I won. Of course you did, kiddo. I never had a doubt. What should I do now? Now you call your parents and tell them their risky investment just paid off in ways they never imagined. The call to my parents was the hardest phone call I'd ever had to make. Not because I was nervous about telling them the news, but because I realized I was about to change our entire family dynamic with a single conversation. Mom answered on the second ring. Hi, honey, how are classes going? Mom, I need to tell you something. Can you put me on speakers so Dad can hear too? Of course. Is everything okay? I took a deep breath. I just won the National Student Entrepreneur Competition. There was complete silence on the other end. You won? What? Dad's voice came through faintly. The National Student Entrepreneur Competition. It's run by Meridian Ventures, one of the biggest venture capital firms in Chicago. I won $50,000 in funding and a consulting position. More silence. Sophie, Mom's voice was barely a whisper. How did we not know you were competing in something like this? And there it was. The question that laid bare 4 years of distance between us. Because I didn't think you'd understand what I was building. What do you mean? So I told them everything. I told them about Sophie's solutions, about the clients I'd been working with, about the revenue I'd been generating. I told them about the employees I'd hired, the contracts I'd signed, the business I'd built from absolutely nothing. You've been running a company this whole time, Dad asked. Yes. While maintaining your grades, I have a 3.8 GPA. Another long pause. Sophie, Mom's voice cracked. Why didn't you tell us? It was such a simple question, but the answer was so complicated. Because 4 years ago you told me I was too risky to invest in, so I decided to prove that your safe bet wasn't the only way to succeed. We never said you were too risky, Dad protested. Dad, those were your exact words. You said Ethan was your sure bet, and I was more of a risk taker. I heard them whispering to each other in the background. Sophie, Mom came back on the line. We're so sorry, we had no idea how that sounded to you. It's okay, Mom, really, it worked out. No, it's not okay. We should have found a way to support both of you. You know what the crazy part is, I said. I'm grateful it happened this way. If you had funded my education, I never would have built Sophie's Solutions. I never would have learned what I was actually capable of. That weekend, something unprecedented happened. My parents drove up to Northwestern to see me. Not for a family event, not because they were passing through, but specifically to understand what I'd been building for the past 4 years. I gave them the full tour. My apartment, my office space, my team. I showed them client testimonials, revenue reports, growth projections. I walked them through every aspect of Sophie's Solutions, like I was presenting to investors. Because in a way, I was. This is incredible! Sophie! Dad kept saying, this is absolutely incredible! But the moment that changed everything happened when we sat down for dinner at a small restaurant near campus. I have something to confess, Mom said, not touching her food. When you first told us about winning the competition, I had to look up what Meridian Ventures was. Okay. Do you know what I found? I shook my head. I found out that they only invest in companies they believe can generate at least $10 million in revenue within 5 years. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Pride mixed with something that looked like awe. Sophie, they didn't just give you $50,000 because you won a competition. They gave it to you because they think your company could be worth tens of millions of dollars. I know, Mom. No, I don't think you understand. Your father and I have been so focused on safe traditional paths that we completely missed the fact that our daughter was building something extraordinary. Dad leaned forward. Sophie, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Okay. Do you resent us for not supporting you the way we supported Ethan? I thought about that question for a long moment. 4 years ago, the answer would have been yes. Absolutely, unequivocally yes. But sitting there looking at my parents, really seeing me for the first time, I realized something had shifted. I don't resent you, I said slowly. But I do need you to understand something. I didn't build Sophie's Solutions to prove you wrong. I built it to prove to myself that I could create my own path. And you did? Mom said softly. Yeah, I did. The conversation that followed was the most honest we'd ever had as a family. They told me about their fears about how they'd been raised to believe that college funding was about minimizing risk. They admitted that they'd seen Ethan's path as more predictable, more guaranteed. I told them about the loneliness of building something alone, about the nights I'd questioned whether I was making the right choices, about how much their approval had always mattered to me, even when I pretended it didn't. There's something else we need to tell you, Dad said as we were finishing dinner. What? We've been talking to Ethan about his plans after graduation. He told us he wants to start a company with you. He mentioned that to you. More than mentioned. He spent 2 hours explaining why he thinks combining his technical expertise with your business skills could create something revolutionary. Mom smiled. He said, and I quote, "Sophie has already proven she can turn ideas into money. I want to learn how to do that too." What do you think about that? I asked. They looked at each other and Dad smiled. I think we'd like to invest in it. I almost choked on my water. What? Sophie, we have $20,000 sitting in a college fund we never used for you. We'd like to be your first official investors. I started laughing. Not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly ironic. You want to invest in me now? We want to invest in both of you. Together. And just like that, our family dynamic shifted from competition to collaboration. But the real validation was still to come. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the Northwestern Communications Department. Sophie, we'd like you to be our student speaker at graduation. I'm sorry, what? The student speaker. We'd like you to give a speech to the graduating class and their families about entrepreneurship and creating your own opportunities. I sat down slowly. Are you sure you have the right person? Sophie, you're the only student in Northwestern history to build a 6-figure business while completing your degree. Your story represents everything we want our graduates to embody. 6-figure business. That's what Sophie's Solutions had become by senior year, though I'd been so focused on growing it that I'd never stopped to appreciate the milestone. What would you want me to talk about? Whatever you want, just tell your story. Graduation day arrived faster than I expected. I was standing backstage in my cap and gown holding my speech notes when Uncle Javier found me. How you feeling, kiddo? Terrified. Good. That means it matters. What if I mess this up? Sophie, you've been proving people wrong your entire college career. Today's just another day at the office. He was right, but this felt different. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every student who'd been told they were too risky, too unconventional, too different to succeed. When they called my name, I walked out onto the stage and looked out at an audience of thousands. Graduates, families, faculty, all looking at me with expectation. I found my parents in the crowd. They were sitting with Uncle Javier, all 3 of them beaming with pride. And then I began to speak. 4 years ago, I was told I was too risky an investment for my own family to fund my education. 4 years ago, I was told I was too risky an investment for my own family to fund my education. Today, I stand before you as proof that sometimes the biggest risks lead to the most extraordinary rewards. The words flowed out of me like I'd been preparing to say them my entire life. I'm not here to tell you that my path was easy or that I recommend everyone build a business while pursuing their degree. I'm here to tell you that when the world tells you there's only one way to succeed, you have the power to create your own definition of success. I talked about resourcefulness, about turning limitations into innovations, about the difference between having opportunities handed to you and creating opportunities for yourself. Some of you are graduating with job offers at prestigious companies. Some of you are heading to graduate school. Some of you have no idea what comes next, and that's okay too. What I want you to remember is this: your value isn't determined by someone else's willingness to invest in you. Your value is determined by what you do when no one believes in you except yourself. I shared the numbers that even surprised me as I said them out loud. Sophie's Solutions had generated over $300,000 in revenue during my 4 years at Northwestern. We'd helped over 500 businesses improve their digital presence. We'd created jobs for 15 students across 3 universities. But more than the numbers, I talked about the transformation. I learned that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the foundation of resilience. I learned that asking for help isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of wisdom. And I learned that the people who doubt you aren't necessarily wrong about the risks. They're just wrong about your ability to handle them. When I finished, the entire auditorium erupted in applause. But I only cared about 3 people in that crowd. My parents were crying. Actually crying. And Uncle Javier was giving me a thumbs up with the biggest grin I'd ever seen. After the ceremony, there was a reception in the main courtyard. I was surrounded by classmates, professors, and family friends who suddenly wanted to know everything about my business. But the conversation that mattered most happened when my family found a quiet corner away from the crowd. "Sophie," Dad said, his voice thick with emotion, "I owe you the biggest apology of my life." "Dad, you don't—" "Yes, I do. We spent 4 years worried about whether you'd be okay when we should have been celebrating everything you were accomplishing." Mom stepped forward. "We were so focused on protecting you from failure that we never saw you succeeding." Ethan, who had driven in from MIT for my graduation, pulled me into a hug. "I'm proud of you, sis. And I meant what I said about partnering up. My thesis got accepted for publication, and 3 companies have already reached out about licensing the technology. But I don't want to do this alone." "What are you proposing, Carter and Carter, a company that builds sustainable technology solutions for businesses that can't afford big consulting firms?" I looked around at my family. 4 years ago, I'd felt like an outsider at our kitchen table. Now, I was the center of a conversation about building something together. "There's one condition," I said. "What's that?" "Uncle Javier has to be our first board member." Uncle Javier laughed. "I'd be honored, kiddo." 3 months later, I was sitting in the Chicago office of Meridian Ventures, giving my final presentation as their summer consultant. The $50,000 from the competition had been the seed funding for Carter and Carter, and we'd already landed our first major client, a renewable energy startup that needed both technical expertise and marketing strategy. Jennifer Walsh, the partner who'd first contacted me, leaned back in her chair. "Sophie, I have a proposition for you." "I'm listening." "We want to offer you a full-time position, senior associate track with the potential to make partner within 5 years. It was everything I dreamed of when I first started building Sophie's Solutions. Prestige financial security, a clear path to success. "It's an incredible offer," I said carefully. But I've spent 4 years learning that the most rewarding path isn't always the most obvious one." She smiled. "You're turning us down to build Carter and Carter. I'm turning you down to bet on myself one more time." "You know what, Sophie, I respect that. And when you're ready for Series A funding, I want you to call me first." That night, I drove back to Northwestern one last time. I wanted to see my old apartment, the coffee shop where I'd worked, the library where I'd written my first business plan. But mostly, I wanted to sit in the spot where I'd made that first decision to prove everyone wrong. I found myself on the porch steps where Uncle Javier had first believed in me, where he'd given me the courage to bet on myself when no one else would. I pulled out my phone and called him. "How'd it go with Meridian?" I turned them down. To build something with Ethan. To build something, period. With Ethan, with you, with anyone crazy enough to believe that sometimes the biggest risks lead to the most extraordinary rewards. "I'm proud of you, kiddo. Your grandmother would be too." As I hung up, I thought about the girl who'd sat at her kitchen table 4 years ago, feeling like she wasn't worth investing in. She had no idea that the limitation she saw as a rejection would become the foundation of her greatest strength. Today, Carter & Carter has 12 employees and generates over $2 million in annual revenue. Ethan and I have been featured in Forbes Fast Company and Entrepreneur magazine. We've spoken at conferences, advised other startups, and yes, my parents are now our biggest champions. But the moment I'm most proud of isn't any of those external validations. It's the scholarship we established at Northwestern called the Risky Investment Fund. It provides full college funding for students whose families can't afford to support their education, with one requirement: they have to propose a project or business idea they want to build while in school. Last year, we funded 12 students. This year, we're funding 25. Because sometimes, the best investment you can make is in someone who's been told they're too risky to succeed. Sometimes the most extraordinary opportunities come disguised as impossible situations. And sometimes, when your family tells you they can't afford to bet on you, the universe is really telling you it's time to bet on yourself. If you're listening to this and you've ever been told you're too risky, too unconventional, or too different to succeed, I want you to know something: they're not wrong about the risk. They're just wrong about your ability to handle it. Take the risk, build something extraordinary, and when you succeed, remember to invest in the next person who's been told they're impossible. What's your impossible dream? What would you build if you knew you couldn't fail? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about turning limitations into launching pads. Because your story isn't over, it's just beginning. 4 years ago, I was told I was too risky an investment for my own family to fund my education. Today, I stand before you as proof that sometimes the biggest risks lead to the most extraordinary rewards. The words flowed out of me like I'd been preparing to say them my entire life. I'm not here to tell you that my path was easy or that I recommend everyone build a business while pursuing their degree. I'm here to tell you that when the world tells you there's only one way to succeed, you have the power to create your own definition of success. I talked about resourcefulness, about turning limitations into innovations, about the difference between having opportunities handed to you and creating opportunities for yourself. Some of you are graduating with job offers at prestigious companies. Some of you are heading to graduate school. Some of you have no idea what comes next, and that's okay too. What I want you to remember is this: your value isn't determined by someone else's willingness to invest in you. Your value is determined by what you do when no one believes in you except yourself. I shared the numbers that even surprised me as I said them out loud. Sophie's Solutions had generated over $300,000 in revenue during my 4 years at Northwestern. We'd helped over 500 businesses improve their digital presence. We'd created jobs for 15 students across 3 universities. But more than the numbers, I talked about the transformation. I learned that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the foundation of resilience. I learned that asking for help isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of wisdom. And I learned that the people who doubt you aren't necessarily wrong about the risks. They're just wrong about your ability to handle them. When I finished, the entire auditorium erupted in applause. But I only cared about 3 people in that crowd. My parents were crying, actually crying, and Uncle Javier was giving me a thumbs up with the biggest grin I'd ever seen. After the ceremony, there was a reception in the main courtyard. I was surrounded by classmates, professors, and family friends who suddenly wanted to know everything about my business. But the conversation that mattered most happened when my family found a quiet corner away from the crowd. "Sophie," Dad said, his voice thick with emotion, "I owe you the biggest apology of my life." "Dad, you don't—" "Yes, I do. We spent 4 years worried about whether you'd be okay when we should have been celebrating everything you were accomplishing." Mom stepped forward. "We were so focused on protecting you from failure that we never saw you succeeding." Ethan, who had driven in from MIT for my graduation, pulled me into a hug. "I'm proud of you, sis, and I meant what I said about partnering up. My thesis got accepted for publication, and 3 companies have already reached out about licensing the technology, but I don't want to do this alone." "What are you proposing?" "Carter and Carter, a company that builds sustainable technology solutions for businesses that can't afford big consulting firms." I looked around at my family. 4 years ago, I'd felt like an outsider at our kitchen table. Now I was the center of a conversation about building something together. "There's one condition," I said. "What's that?" "Uncle Javier has to be our first board member." Uncle Javier laughed. "I'd be honored, kiddo." 3 months later, I was sitting in the Chicago office of Meridian Ventures, giving my final presentation as their summer consultant. The $50,000 from the competition had been the seed funding for Carter and Carter, and we'd already landed our first major client, a renewable energy startup that needed both technical expertise and marketing strategy. Jennifer Walsh, the partner who'd first contacted me, leaned back in her chair. "Sophie, I have a proposition for you." "I'm listening." "We want to offer you a full-time position, senior associate track with the potential to make partner within 5 years. It was everything I dreamed of when I first started building Sophie's Solutions. Prestige, financial security, a clear path to success. "It's an incredible offer," I said carefully. But I've spent 4 years learning that the most rewarding path isn't always the most obvious one." She smiled. "You're turning us down to build Carter and Carter." "I'm turning you down to bet on myself one more time." "You know what, Sophie, I respect that. And when you're ready for Series A funding, I want you to call me first." That night, I drove back to Northwestern one last time. I wanted to see my old apartment, the coffee shop where I'd worked, the library where I'd written my first business plan. But mostly, I wanted to sit in the spot where I'd made that first decision to prove everyone wrong. I found myself on the porch steps where Uncle Javier had first believed in me, where he'd given me the courage to bet on myself when no one else would. I pulled out my phone and called him. "How'd it go with Meridian?" I turned them down. To build something with Ethan. To build something, period. With Ethan, with you, with anyone crazy enough to believe that sometimes the biggest risks lead to the most extraordinary rewards. "I'm proud of you, kiddo. Your grandmother would be too." As I hung up, I thought about the girl who'd sat at her kitchen table 4 years ago feeling like she wasn't worth investing in. She had no idea that the limitation she saw as a rejection would become the foundation of her greatest strength. Today, Carter and Carter has 12 employees and generates over $2 million in annual revenue. Ethan and I have been featured in Forbes' Fast Company and Entrepreneur magazine. We've spoken at conferences, advised other startups, and yes, my parents are now our biggest champions. But the moment I'm most proud of isn't any of those external validations. It's the scholarship we established at Northwestern called the Risky Investment Fund. It provides full college funding for students whose families can't afford to support their education, with one requirement: they have to propose a project or business idea they want to build while in school. Last year, we funded 12 students. This year, we're funding 25. Because sometimes the best investment you can make is in someone who's been told they're too risky to succeed. Sometimes the most extraordinary opportunities come disguised as impossible situations. And sometimes, when your family tells you they can't afford to bet on you, the universe is really telling you it's time to bet on yourself. If you're listening to this and you've ever been told you're too risky, too unconventional, or too different to succeed, I want you to know something. They're not wrong about the risk. They're just wrong about your ability to handle it. Take the risk. Build something extraordinary. And when you succeed, remember to invest in the next person who's been told they're impossible. What's your impossible dream? What would you build if you knew you couldn't fail? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about turning limitations into launching pads. Because your story isn't over. It's just beginning.